Hello and welcome to the ProtoPod, the podcast for engineers, innovators, entrepreneurs, and trailblazers shaping the future. Here, we dive into the cutting-edge world of prototyping, aerospace, rapid manufacturing, mass customization, and beyond. I'm your host, Jordan Rose. Today, I'm thrilled to have Russ Van Der Werff, Chief Balloon Evangelist at Aerostar, as our guest. Aerostar is a leader in designing and manufacturing advanced aerospace and defense solutions. They focus on areas such as stratospheric balloon systems and airships, radar systems for defense and security, and protective wear for aviation and defense. Hey Russ, welcome into the ProtoPod. Pleasure to meet you. I'm really excited to get chatting. I took the liberty to watch your TED Talk prior to our podcast, and I thought it was incredibly interesting. First time I've ever met somebody who has done a TED Talk. Can you kind of explain to me what that process was like, how that happened?
Well, I say it gets started against my will because I think we had, as a company, had sponsored the event, and they're like, hey, you should really have some people apply to give a talk. It's like, wow, we're not going to get accepted anyway. So, sure. And I made a little 30-second video, and it's like, congratulations. Oh, shoot. But yeah. So it was a process. I mean, it's definitely, I do a lot of talking about what we do just generally in my job, but, this is the first time I've had to talk about it and had it kind of workshopped and so forth. So, you prep for a few months and you condense your timeline and you tweak and you adjust, and there's other folks that come and listen and give feedback on what's good and bad. So, it was kind of interesting actually to get that experience and be getting that direct feedback. It's probably good for me. So. Yeah,
I thought it was great. I mean, it was pretty funny as well. I thought you did a great job opening it up and kind of providing some levity to the audience. It was, I think, a very concise way to explain what you do. Can you kind of explain to me your history in coming to Aerostar and what that was like, what your baby background was, how you got into the position that you're in right now?
Yeah, sure, certainly. So, as a very young boy, I wanted to be a balloon engineer. Oh, no, never mind. I'm pretty boring, man. I grew up out here in South Dakota. I went to engineering school, and I got a job working on satellite communications stuff at a company that built that kind of kit, and did that for, a decade plus. And at one point, just thinking, hey, it's time to try something new, I started looking around, and I came across Aerostar. And for those who aren't familiar yet, because we're just getting started on this conversation, one of the things that we do here, and the thing that I work on personally, is high altitude balloons, which is, when I was talking around to different companies, came across this opportunity, and it was like, wait, you do what? That's a thing that anybody does in the world, and just got to talking to some of the team, and it's been a lot of fun. We had this idea of all the stuff you could do with balloons in the stratosphere if you could just navigate them and persist them over an area and stuff. And it was a small team when I started. It was very startup-y, even though the company's established and has been doing aerospace stuff for 70 years, and got to grow with the team, got to build it up, and it's been a great ride for the last 8 years or so.
Yes, I didn't realize. So this is the stratospheric balloon division is fairly new in the company, is it? Is that correct?
Well, so we've been building balloons, like the actual high-altitude balloon shells, since 1956. So that's
okay.
Old hat, and that piece of that, I'd say.
Yeah, so really, I think the jump start, or the kick in the pants, as it were, is we started working with a little tech company called Google that some may have heard of about 15 years ago. And they had this concept of using these balloons to provide cellular service to disadvantaged areas, places where there was no infrastructure. So that was a project called Loon. And so that really was a new idea of, instead of just using these high altitude balloons in the past, it's always been kind of scientific research. We got started doing early testing for the space program and stuff like that, because you're way up in the atmosphere, way above aircraft and stuff. To say, well, we're going to do something more practical on a ground-based and something that can scale a little bit. And so really great experience working with them for about a decade. And I'd say the confluence of that project, along with the maturation of, more compact computers, batteries, machine learning, solar technology, a bunch of the stuff that makes our systems work now, is that we now have a platform that's more like an aircraft where we can navigate it to a place, keep it there, keep it flying for months at a time. And that opens up a whole lot of new things you can do, even though balloons are not a new technology or a new idea.
Yeah, that was one of the main takeaways I guess I had from the TED Talk was how I guess flexible and nimble the idea of using balloons for communications in case of emergency or what have you are. I have you written down as the chief balloon evangelist at Aerostar. What do you think it is that excites you most about that technology, like what potential it has? What gets you up in the morning with balloons?
Well, honestly, what gets me up in the morning is the team I work with. I mean, we just have a great group of engineers who are out there to try to, one of our little slogans or mottos on the wall is "Dare Mighty Things." So it's just coming in every day and asking, what's something cool we can make work that nobody has made work before? So, the balloon stuff is really a never-ending source of that, because I think the idea of using balloons for the kinds of things we do is new, as we talked about. But we do other things as well. We work on autonomous naval vessels with radar systems and perception, detection, eyes and ears of boats that are out there without drivers. We work on different aerospace projects with NASA, including like scientific testing. And so, it's a really fun place to work. I mean, because the people are great and all the stuff we work on is really cool. So, but the chief balloon evangelist is not my HR title. I keep trying to get them to change the system. But, I do right now. I lead the group that does a high altitude balloon work, but I've done a lot of stuff here. And it's just been, a cool company that's small. We're moving fast. We're doing neat stuff and new stuff, and it's a great team to work with. So, no,
I love that. It's the innovation and the seeing that innovation in others is what is exciting, and I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, I do see a lot of similarities in what you guys are doing and what we do here, from a velocity and moving quickly and helping our customers do that. And the excitement in watching people innovate. Another takeaway I actually had from the TED Talk was very much in line with that. So you talked about how the most obvious solution often isn't the simplest or the best, and kind of challenge people to think outside the box. And that's something that we talk a lot about here. And we're solving problems for customers in a way that many manufacturers aren't. And in order to do that, we have to be very divergent with our thinking. And I think that is something that is a challenge for people, especially people new to the workforce, maybe straight out of university. Is what I've found is that we teach people in formal education that everything has an answer, that's X plus Y equals Z, and it's not always the case. And it's really a transition for people to open their mind up and think divergently and not be afraid to try stupid things because they might not be stupid. So that was something that I wanted to ask you. Was you're a leader in your organization, a great leader from my perspective. What do you do in order to foster that culture of challenging the norms, being creative, innovation? What do you do on a day-to-day basis to enable that?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with having a culture established and communicating it and being honest and authentic to it, being consistent with it. And so, we do have I've got my coffee mug here. We do have the 5 maxims. We talked about Dare Mighty Things, but the other things, you'll see these plastered all over the building. Do what's right, make a difference, own it, and keep it simple. And you referenced some of those too in talking about your work experience. And on one hand, I'm a little bit of a realist. I'm a little bit of a skeptic, and so I come in and say, well, what does having your slogan on the wall really do? And the answer is it doesn't do anything. But if you have agreed on what your culture is and what your slogan is and what your bullet points are, and then you stick to that, you actually behave that way, that makes a huge difference. And so, I don't know, one of those quotes that some of the people around here know quotes better than me is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think that's where it starts is having that and sticking to it. And then, the other thing I'd say I think is most important out of there, the through line is letting people own it, letting people keep it simple and make a difference means actually delegating. So I'd say, one of the things we talk about a lot here is how do you flow authority for decisions down to the lowest practical level? Because at the end of the day, the guy doing the work probably has a better sense than
100%.
3 levels of management up.
Yep.
And then the counterbalance to that is you have to have responsibility and accountability if you're a manager too. So you have to be comfortable with the decisions that are being made. And if you don't and aren't, you got to dig in and understand and correct if needed. So that's the tension. But I think, if you strive to flow it down, you strive to let people do the right thing and keep it simple and make good decisions, and you can keep everybody aligned with that up and down the chain. That's how you can keep that innovation moving.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's funny, I have a colleague of mine who sends around a little leadership quote every few days, and he actually sent that one around the other day. The culture and strategy for breakfast. And anyway, it's a funny one. But no, I mean, yeah, there's so much to unpack there in relation to culture and your core values, and making sure that those are not just a sticker on the wall, that those are actually something that you live by. And that, for us here, we have a very similar thing, and it's something that you have to do. You have to beat that drum every day and use those things in everything that you do. And I think you hit the nail on the head, that is the key to fostering that culture. I also couldn't agree more with that, the delegation piece and empowering people to, make their own decisions and leading them to become better decision makers and increase their level of ownership and increase their leadership capacity. And that's how you kind of scale things out. I do want to ask, and please feel free to tell me if there's anything that you can't discuss. Is there any projects that you and your team are maybe working on right now that are most exciting to you, maybe are the most innovative, or is there too many to count?
There's a lot, but there's certainly some things I can talk about. I'll maybe pick 2 or 3 things just to highlight. Within the balloon side, which is kind of where I primarily am doing my work, a couple of cool applications that we've developed recently that aren't secret and aren't government blah blah. I can't talk about stuff. Is one would be we've been working with the U.S. Forest Service and NASA and the National Interagency Fire Center on something called Project Strato, which is the idea of putting these balloons out there over active wildfires, which is very topical right now, and really the last few years is the cadence of climate change. And so, we've been putting these systems up with 2 things, right? One is a infrared camera sensor that can look down and actively in real time map the progression of a fire. So when you're up at 70,000 feet plus, you get a lot more perspective than an aircraft even that's flying. And of course you have satellites that occasionally make passes over the fire, but there's nothing that beats something that's parked up there looking down. And then the second thing that's on the system is a LTE communication package. So think where a lot of this stuff happens out in the mountains and things like that. There is no infrastructure. There's no way for these guys to call out from the front line necessarily. Most of them have radios, but terrain, forests. And so when you put that communication package together, and then we use satellite to get a link out, then we can give them real-time access to talk to the folks at what they call incident command or headquarters. We can give the firefighter on the ground a real-time situational picture of where he's at, where the fire is, where it's moving, where everyone else is at, which is just, one of the things. Our overarching company model is connect, protect, and save lives. And I mean, it doesn't get any more direct than that. So I'm really excited about that project, and that's been a lot of fun. Another thing that we've been working on that I think is definitely in the sphere of make a difference. Been working with actually the oil and gas companies on monitoring for methane emissions. So there's a company called Scepter Air that does data service provision to those guys so they can track for issues. And so they're out there going, I've got half the western half of Texas covered in equipment. I know that there are occasionally leaks. How do I watch half of the state? Texas is pretty big. And so we put the balloon up there, and we can be constantly scanning so they can dispatch teams to curb those things when there is something going wrong. So that's a really cool project that we can all feel really good about too. And again, not at all secret or anything. And then the other, I mentioned a little bit is working with the U.S. Navy on unmanned surface vessel programs. So they're looking at how do they get just like there's planes in the air everywhere that are doing constant missions without pilots, right? They're looking to do the same thing with boats. And of course, if you got a boat out there driving around, you've got all kinds of cool stuff that needs to be done to figure out, like, I don't want to hit anything. There's another boat there. How do I avoid it? How do I know it's there? there's things right now like, okay, if you're getting approached by another vessel, you honk. Well, if there's nobody on the boat, how does it know? So there's perception systems with radars and cameras and audio stuff to figure out how to enable that kind of autonomous behavior and navigation. So those are 3 different things that I think are really cool that we're actively working right now.
Yeah, they all sound really interesting. Actually, I don't even know where to start. The Project Strato, the fire detection and mitigation project, is that something that is actively in use? And if so, is that something that you've been able to see in action?
Yeah, yep. So we did a pilot project with a pilotless project. I do have kids, so dad jokes are in my wheelhouse.
No, that's I appreciate it.
We did a small startup project with NASA. So 2 years ago, we did a tech demo just to show what we could do on our own funding. Just say, hey, this would be cool. Last year, we got a system out over the West Mountain Complex, west of Boise, Idaho, during the wildfire season, and had a balloon up there for several months over the summer, doing that monitoring. And then we're going to be doing hopefully 3 or 4 systems this next summer in the western U.S. again as an expansion on that, as NASA continues to test and refine what sensors they want and what the most effective way to push that data down is. But yeah, it was a big thing for us this summer. I've got actual recordings of cell phone screens of firefighters where they've got a little map and it's showing that fire progression. That's all getting measured from the balloon, rendered on the balloon in hardware in real time. There's a company called Range and Bearing we worked with, they're actually a Canadian company, that they're creating a map in real time that then the firefighter gets on their phone to see where that fire is, and the little dots where they're at, where they the fire. And you can imagine how big of a deal that is, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. How did that make you feel, seeing that?
It's exciting, man. Look, we have been looking at this stuff for a number of years here, and we think we can see the potential. But I'll be honest, you go to somebody and say, I'm going to solve your problem with balloons. It isn't just jump off as a tech-heavy, really awesome solution. So the biggest thing for us is just convincing people and showing people what's possible. And there's no better way to do that than actually be up there doing it. PowerPoint slides only get you so far. You got to prototype, test, get out in the field and experiment and show what can be done. And then people start to buy in. So
absolutely,
it feels like coming to fruition on something we've hoped for and seen coming for a long time, actually.
Yeah, it's funny. It actually kind of relates to your point, your TED Talk about kind of challenging the norms. It doesn't matter if you have a preconception on what a balloon is. If it does the job better than anything else, it does the job better than anything else. And I personally think that they're pretty slick looking from the videos that I saw. What is a typical lifetime for one of these balloons? Like, is there an expiration date when they're up in the atmosphere? How does that work?
Yeah, so every balloon leaks eventually, right? Yep. So what we've been working on for 70 years is making balloons that leak less. And for those of you who've done the physics and the chemistry, helium is kind of a small molecule. It likes to get out. Yep. So one of the things that is really enabling tech that people don't think about that we have uniquely is figuring out how to seal together the different pieces of the balloon to prevent the leaks. And that's something that really is something that goes back to the start of Aerostar being Aerostar, based on how you weld the pieces together, the formulation of the plastic, and those are the ones where you talk about it sounds simple and it's plastic and sealant and the materials are simple, but there's so much to getting it right. The analogy is always you might have the recipe card for grandma's roast, but when you try to make it, it doesn't taste the same, right? Because there's all these little steps in the middle. So then, the other pieces that go along with it are really cool too. I mean, the navigation piece is really, we've cracked a lot of that with machine learning here in the last 10 years or so. And that modeling the winds, people have not put a lot of effort into modeling the winds at 70,000 feet because it doesn't really affect whether it's going to rain tomorrow, which is what everybody cares about. So, yeah, there's just a lot of really fun stuff. And, every day I get to poke myself into a new area of what we're doing and be excited about it. So.
No, it's definitely it's a world that I didn't know exist, and probably because it's far above my head, both figuratively.
See how you're doing it.
Both figuratively and literally. What do you think the future holds for Aerostar? Where do you see the company progressing from your perspective?
Well, I mean, we're really trying to base, again, like we talked about before, off of that culture and ask what other challenges can we solve? What are we uniquely positioned to solve? So if you use the balloons as an example, they're started out with, we know how to build a balloon shell. And then we started to talk about, the navigation and what could be done there. And we started to do prototypes there. And now we're starting to do things like this wildfire test where we're putting sensors on and asking what can be done with the sensors. And then you go up the value chain to say, well, now I know the problem I'm trying to solve. How do we do more of the processing of that sensor data on board so that we get the real actionable information down to the guys who need it? And so I think we're looking to continue expanding out in our tech capability to say, well, what are the things that are adjacent? Now that we've seen what we can do with this, now we see not just the product we're selling, but the problem we're trying to solve for the customer. So you say, okay, well, how do we help them solve more of that problem? What partners can we work with? What could we design? Where can we make things a little bit better? Generally speaking, aerospace, sensing, defense is kind of our business focus, our business area. We talked about the connect, protect, and save lives. So we're not out to go look to become, the nation's leading toaster manufacturer or something. But, within that market space of tough tech problems in aerospace, defense, sensing, things like that, we're trying to enable our team to have the freedom to maneuver and find the next cool problem to solve.
Yeah, I like that. It's all based around what the customer wants, right? And that going back to the core values idea, that's one of our core values. It's the one on top of the list. Is customers are number one. It's what their needs are our first priority, right? And I think the fact that is your direction in whatever form that takes is how much more stuff can we pack in the box in order to satisfy our customers further, I think is a great direction. And I think will bring you guys lots of success. My last question. So you've had a very interesting career working on a lot of cutting edge technology, now in a leadership position. Any young engineers or scientists or innovators who may be listening, is there any advice that you would give them?
Oh, most generally? I mean, that's a pretty open-ended question.
It is.
I would say stay curious. I mean, that sounds cliche. Different people are going to end up in different places. I'm not always sure ending up in leadership is what I want, much less what anyone else wants. But, you're going to find what you're passionate about. And for me, that's how are we solving cool problems for customers in a legitimate way using technology? So what got me to where I'm at right now is mostly an interest from doing originally circuit boards and software and things like that, up towards, okay, well, how is someone using this? And then, okay, well, what are the pieces around this that are needed to make that work? And so that's my personal curiosity. That's where that brought me is, more into the broader system and what does the customer need and want. But, some people might have a different areas that, they want to go deeper or they want to learn more about a new technology, I don't think there's a right or wrong in any of that. And one of the cool things about being in tech or engineering is there's an infinite number of directions you can go. As long as you stay curious and open to learning, follow what you're excited about, and I'd say, when we talked about the core values and what makes the company work and the guiding principle, it's not just having those things on the wall and not just preaching it, but it's finding people who share that. I'm a learner, I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to stay excited. And if you can fall into that category, you can be successful in any industry or business, I think, and find yourself fulfilled. So maybe that's a little too cliche, but I guess that's where I started.
I don't think at all. I think that's an excellent answer. And I think that you're totally right. The everything is very open-ended for young engineers. There's lots of different options, but I think that the curiosity and willingness to learn and openness to that are some of the key ones. And you kind of touched on the fact that you never really saw yourself maybe going to leadership, and that's also something I think is important. Is that typically the best leaders are the ones who don't necessarily want to be that right away, but it just comes naturally, and it builds into that. So that's usually a great sign.
And if you're in an enabling culture and at the right company, and I'd encourage everyone, if you're not, just get looking. But at the same time, if you are and you found a good home, then I think people come to me and say, well, what do I have to do to get a promotion or get this job someday? It's like, well, you're thinking about it wrong.
Exactly.
What do I have to do to add value? How do I move the ball for the company?
Exactly.
If you do that and you're in the right environment, the right culture, you're going to get new opportunities because that's what everybody needs is to get the job done. So.
Yeah, you're totally right. And that's ultimately where people will find their fulfillment in themselves as well, right?
It's adding value and making a difference,
Yeah. Absolutely. Russ, it's been great getting to chat. I'll be following Aerostar really closely. I think that you guys are a super fascinating company, and you're a super fascinating guy, and really appreciate you coming on and giving us a few minutes to discuss what you guys do and what's important to you. So thank you very much.
Thanks. It's been great talking. We appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Russ. Okay. Bye-bye, guys.